She told me one day, one thing you will never hear a parent say on their deathbed is, I just wish I would have given my children a smartphone much earlier in life. And I think she's right. It's anecdotal, but I can say it as a parent, as an educator, it does not help to form the individual.
This is Virtuous Leaders, the podcast for based Catholics who will speak truth, do good, or die trying. Here's the show. You were the head of school at St. Jerome Academy. Just to understand this school a little bit, I've been told that it was the first diocesan school to implement a classical liberal arts model. That it seems like a pretty big statement. Is that true?
As far as I know, that's true. It's a claim that comes across pretty readily because most of the schools that have adopted a classical liberal arts curriculum in the country in a Catholic setting are of a private independent nature. So St. Jerome's, to my knowledge, was the first one that was a purely parochial, diocesan-based parish school. It was actually started in the 1940s to adopt this approach and to kind of go down this road and do a full 180 from what they had done in the past. Yeah, so that's my understanding.
So under your leadership, I understand that school grew enormously, something like from 300 students to 500 students, and families were flying across the country to attend this school.
Yeah. And I would even like preface any statement about that. And like the heaviest lift was actually done slightly before my time. So 2010, the school went through a consultation process where they were discerning the future of the school. They were working with the diocese. The diocese, in fact, put a few parameters in play to say, unless you meet this financial goal, they were running a deficit, unless you climb out of the debt by this percentage and you increase your enrollment by this percentage, we will have to consider closing the school. So that became like the impetus. That's the short answer of like what prompted the whole piece moving in one particular direction as opposed to where it came from. So I came on as a teacher when the school decided to adopt the liberal arts curriculum, and I started teaching humanities in the 8th grade, did that for 6 years, and then became principal. So I will preface anything further by saying like, my predecessor, Mary Pat Donahue, she laid the foundation along with the pastor, Father Stack, and a group of very committed parishioners that wrote the educational plan for St. Jerome. Like all the foundational building blocks were in place. And then when I took over, much of the heavy lifting was already underway, if not completed. So that when I took over, it was kind of a different situation in such that there were many families that had applied and reapplied to the school for numerous consecutive years in a row, that we were faced with the question of, do we just continue to accept like 5% of the people that are applying because those are the only seats that we have, or do we consider another avenue and try and grow the school and make space? At the school's height of enrollment in the 1960s, they had 900 students in the school. So we knew there was a chance to find more square footage, to find more space. Now, I say that this was in the 60s where kids were sitting shoulder to shoulder between 60 and 70 kids in a homeroom. So that's not the model that any school operates in today. So we were looking at a different realm. But, one person on our committee said, like, I think we need to just kind of consider ourselves like the Notre Dame of elementary schools and just take like the top 15% of the applicant pool. And that never really sat well with me and other members on the committee to say, like, we're not Notre Dame, we're a parish-based school, and we're trying to do something beautiful and expose as many families and students to it as possible, and not just create kind of like an elite kind of funnel for those that just happen to time their schooling for their children today. We need to broaden the funnel, if anything, and make more space, find more seats, make this available for more kids and more families, because clearly there's a desire, right? If you apply to the same school 3-4 years in a row for your child, it means you're not going anywhere. It means you're looking for exactly what the school's offering. And I could say too, it wasn't just applications. These were mission fit families, like people that we wanted to find spots for. It wasn't just like, this could be a nice revenue stream. It was none of that. It was like, most of these families, to your point, had already moved to the area. We were already parishioners in the parish. They were walking to mass every day, participating in the culture and the life of the community at large. And for whatever reason, their timing was just a little bit behind the curve of when the school launched this model. So we worked with the diocese, and it was a thoughtful, prayerful decision with the pastor, with all the different members. But in the end, it just made the most sense to go back to a 2-track model and add an additional class to each grade. We ended up doing it 1 year at a time. So that became the impetus for the largest growth for the school, and the families continue to follow. So like we opened up space and kept, that wave class moving all the way through. They'll be in 8th grade next year. So next year they'll be at full capacity with no more square footage, not a single inch to give or another desk to add. But the enrollment still remains the same. I think they're still averaging about 300 applications each year for about 60 to 65 spots, which shows you that the local community, the families really desire this model, this form of education for their families.
And now you're the vice president of diocesan relations at ICLE. What is ICLE?
Sure. So we actually kind of came into being around 1999, and I would say really kind of landed on the map around a similar time as St. Jerome's was going through adopting their educational plan. So prior to that, the organization had offered some academic retreats for teachers, had showcased a few professional development services, but was really in some ways like a project of our two co-founders, Mike Van Hecky and Andrew Seeley, and they had basically gone where there was a need. But they founded the organization to really aim at the heart of the individual teacher, to kind of like restore, renew, foster growth and professional development for teachers, to see what the church's charter for education is, and in a particular way to offer the opportunity to grow in maturation and understanding what the liberal arts is and what it could be for K-12 education. So they themselves had experienced at university, and they saw like, well, if you actually allow the chance for the students to fall in love with truth, beauty, and goodness at a much younger age, this can help them flourish through all stages of education, and not just save the liberal arts for university studies, but really get it underway at an earlier moment. And so it's just continued to spread. Most of our work continues and remains to be that of working with individual faculties, individual teachers, superintendents, it's educators, and working with the heart of educators, trying to help them see the larger scope of what the liberal arts could offer them in their school.
What role does digital technology play in these schools?
Yeah, interesting question. I think it varies from school to school. Some of it depends on the charter, some of it depends on diocesan policy, but it runs the gamut of everything from one-to-one devices being used by students in the classrooms to no technology whatsoever being used on campus. Now, that can vary greatly depending on the age group, but I would say, like, painting with a broad brush, a large grouping, a majority of the schools that we serve tend to not use technology as the first vehicle for understanding what it means to be educated. If anything, many of the teachers in the schools that we serve use it as a tool or a vehicle to explore a chance to see something that maybe you couldn't see otherwise. So they might be looking at a map for geography. They might be using a document camera to show cursive or a math problem. I guess all that to say, in simple form, it is being used by some of the schools that we serve, not in the capacity where it's, well, this does happen some places, but it's much smaller grouping where it's like one-to-one and the student has access to technology in every single classroom, those kind of things.
Yeah. It's one thing to show a map on the board or what have you. But do you notice, let's take a specific case of having a personal device, whether it's an iPad, a laptop, or also allowing students to have their smartphones on them the day. You have a lot of experience from different schools in the position you're in. Do you notice any difference in schools that allow those things versus schools that don't?
Yeah, I think the most obvious piece is in the element of distractibility. Like those that have that device permissible with them on their person throughout the school day, there's a natural inclination. There's a draw that pulls away from the things that we would be aiming the school to expose their students to, the ability to ponder, to wonder, to consider rich, deep questions and enter like into the heart of debate. Because you have pondered and wondered the essence of what something is, it inclines you to continue to go deeper. If you can't get to that mode, if education merely just stays at knowledge base understanding of just like, you just need to know A and B and C, and that's it. And you don't need to know how they're related. You don't know how to compare, contrast any of them. You don't need to know how to explain them on your own 2 feet. Then then a school might make an argument of like, yeah, they can have their technology with them because we're just aiming for this good. I think most of the schools that we're aiming for is not only knowledge, but then understanding, and then the final step, which would be wisdom. And that calls upon the student and the teacher to really engage at a totally different level than merely knowledge. And I think it just behooves everyone in the process to afford yourself the human and intellectual experience to kind of put technology down and allow a chance to engage your intellect and really challenge yourself to think deeply and richly through any truth that's presented to you, any question, any falsehood. You want to claim ownership of your own thoughts, of your own opinions, of statements. And I think we can all just agree in a general sense that, the notion of having technology in your pocket all days, it does serve as a distraction. Any thought that comes to mind or any reference check of any of those things, there's immediate, well, I can just get it solved here. I can answer it here. Let me see what people are saying about X, Y, and Z. And that may be efficient. It may be convenient to do in many settings, but I think the rise of education, particularly K-12, should really be predicated on channeling the intellect and the natural desire that's already in the student to determine why, to really get at the heart of like, why do we believe X, Y, or Z? Why do we even desire to know anything that's true? Like we're made for that. So like we have to fuel that in one sense. We have to like allow that to flourish within the heart of the individual.
If you don't mind, I'm just going to pursue this thread a little bit because this is a topic I'm really interested in and becoming increasingly interested in it. You were the head of a Catholic school. What would you say to a parent who's wondering whether to get their kid a smartphone?
I mean, me personally, I would say delay it as much as you can. Anecdotally, have a friend, her children are all grown and she had to wrestle with this question, but she told me one day, one thing you will never hear a parent say on their deathbed is, I just wish I would have given my children a smartphone much earlier in life. And I think she's right. It's anecdotal, but I can say it as a parent, as an educator, it does not help to form the individual. And if we look at the formative years of adolescence, we need to have clear voices for children, right? So the parents first, right? The next kind of layer of what children consider the most trusted source for actually being presented the truth are the formal educators that they're exposed to, whether that's a tutor, a homeroom teacher, a specialist, whatever it may be. A child looks at those adults and says, like, I trust the goods of life to this person to showcase them to me. So the more you can delay it, I think the better off you are. I understand there's ramifications in today's world around safety, around community, around transportation. All of those things are real. So I don't begrudge anybody for giving their child a smartphone at a particular age, but I think the more you can delay it based on your natural inclination of what you feel like or what your community is saying, I think the better off your child will be. And it just allows you to foster a better relationship with your kid as well. And there's plenty of kids that have been doing it. There's plenty of studies that have shown the more that you delay. There's a great piece by Jonathan Haidt, The Anxious Generation, which I know many adults have picked up. And I mean, I just encourage parents to even just read the intro to that, where they're explaining the notion of, the metaphor of handing a smartphone to a child that's too young to a parent dropping off their child on the planet. And they have no concept or reality of actually what they're going to be exposed to. I think there's a lot of truth to that. So the more you can foster the natural order for children to kind of grow and develop without this distractible tool that opens up a window into all sorts of other things, I think it benefits the child ultimately. And there's going to come a day where they need to get a device, they need to get a phone, they need to get a laptop, they need to get those things. And then you just, you walk through still with parental guidance and an eye to protect them and help them be able to flourish. So you don't merely just purchase the piece and hand it to them. So even when that day comes, you still want to kind of navigate and unpack things with a delicate nature with the child's best interest in mind.
So if you don't mind me asking a personal question, you are the father of 14. You're a patriarch. That's amazing. I have deep respect for you. What is your personal policy in your family towards smartphones for your children?
Sure. We've delayed primarily till they were of driving age to hold off on giving them any device. So none of my kids have had any device in elementary school. It's always been in high school. And we haven't used, just in general in our family, we don't have like universal principles of like, you turn this age and you automatically get X, Y, or Z. We kind of like look at each individual and say, what are their needs? What are their circumstance? What's different? I have kids that have used public transportation, the local metro system in the greater Washington area to get to school. I have kids that have driven 45 to 60 minutes to get one way to school. So those are parameters and factors that are in play for us. But I would say by and large, our family rule has centered around this notion of when you start driving, then we'll consider it. And then even within that layer, there's variations of different smartphones that you can choose. We've tested and tried different things, and learned a lot in the process. We haven't skated through unscathed in every single category.
Yeah. So as a father of 14, do you have any devices that you particularly recommend or don't recommend?
I don't recommend just handing a device with internet access of any kind to a child in elementary school. I think there's just an immense danger there of saying, just use this, run with it. There's a whole lot I could say there, but I'll jump to the smartphone or cell phone piece. We have tried some features where you can where there's a promise of parental control that you can manage and operate. I will say the devil's quite savvy, and temptation is always on the cusp for young people, and so they find a way, or the devil kind of shows them the way to kind of navigate through, whether it's tablet, smartphone, laptop, all of those pieces. Despite all of your best measures in play, that's always going to be an element. I don't think that'll ever go away from any form of technology. We have used two that I'll mention that are helpful. One is called the Light Phone, which has no internet access on it. So one of my children used that for a portion of time and found it helpful to a degree. The rest of the family actually has to adjust as well to seeing that, like, how slow and how undistracted the person is by having a phone. You kind of have to adjust like that on the inside to say they're not quite as accessible as we're accustomed to. So fine. We've also found healthy success with the Wise Phone, in which the parents can determine which apps are available or accessible on the phone whatsoever, and it has no internet accessibility. Those are two pieces which have been really helpful. But I've heard good things about lots of other pieces. The pinwheel phone, I've heard some good things about. Our family hasn't used that directly, but I think there's an uptick in options for parents in the last 3 to 5 years about options just beyond your common smartphone or iPhone that many parents felt like was the only option in front of them.
A technology question that comes to mind here. So you work directly with heads of school. How do you help those heads of schools protect their children from digital destruction?
Yeah, really good question. I should say the work of our institute is to allow a chance for people to be drawn into the truths of the Catholic Church surrounding education. So we don't prescribe policy. We don't write objectives and standards that are then mandated across a diocesan board or across a school. It's not to say that we would never get into that one day, but I'm just saying at this point in time, we haven't done that. Most of it, I would say, is conversational. Most of it is by way of advice. We do a fair amount of consulting with principals and heads of school, and can say, like, in many of the schools that we serve, these are some common threads that follow, which is many of the schools do not allow smartphones in the classroom, or they have a policy where if you're using it to travel to and from school, you drop it off in the main office, or it sits in a locked box in their locker. Or, we usually, when we make a recommendation, it's usually like 3 to 5 recommendations. It's not one. We usually, just respect the mode of the school leader on site and say, like, this has been our experiences, what we've seen. Here's some things to consider, but you might have local jurisdiction might intervene, or you might have diocesan policy that needs to supersede whatever you want to do in your school. So that's more common, I would say.
Want to end big here. Would you go into sharing your vision at ICLE, what you hope to accomplish, and even beyond that in your professional life as a whole?
Yeah, I think ICLE is at a beautiful moment in the history of its organization, in that I think many Catholic schools and school leaders in particular are kind of seeing this educational philosophy of this is how we've always done things as having run its course. And you see that from school leaders to teachers to superintendents, to bishops, and pastors. Actually, most importantly, I've heard them say that the most of, like, there's no fruit. I have a Catholic school, it's on my campus, and the enrollment is average at best. The culture is maybe lukewarm, and I'm doing my darndest to lift up the culture in the parish, in the school, and there's a very lackluster response. And I think a lot of pastors have reclaimed their canonical authority and kind of taken an active step and a role to get involved in the school and say, like, if I'm going about spending my priesthood and my time here at this parish, I want to make my school authentically Catholic, and I want to draw them into the treasures that the church actually has in store for them, and not merely just do as we've always done or just go through the motions. So that's actually been beautiful to watch a large number of priests, bishops, superintendents kind of weigh that question in particular. I think there's a fair amount of school leaders too, but I think that first group of bishops, superintendents, and pastors are really wrestling with that kind of desire, that premise. So ICLE is here, and much of the way that our organization has been set up is based on need. So, somebody calls us and asks for something, and then we're at a discernible moment of, like, do we offer that? Do we want to offer that? Is there directly in line with the mission and vision of what we've always set out to do? So that's kind of like the litmus test. So there's, I think, a growing trend of opportunities to form teachers at an earlier age, but then veterans as well. We have a common practice that's been around the organization for a while, forming teachers in the summertime in a variety of different formats. So one would be like an academic retreat where they're drawn into things like seminar, to picture study, to poetry, and then discussing how these conversations on a primary source or text have gone after the fact. We've been running a national conference for over 10 years, jumping around the country. We serve about 500 people in person at that conference, and usually about another 1,500 online. That's gained a lot of traction. People desire to use their summertime to be formed really well. There's two more I'll mention. One is what we call the Spirit and Craft of Teaching. It's a 5-day immersive experience where you take a teacher and walk them through the whole process of the liberal arts, the theology, philosophy, pedagogy, and anthropology, and they can see it soup to nuts in 5 days. And that's proven to be very life-giving, very fulfilling, very transformative for teachers, whether it's their second year or their 20th year. So we're increasing those offerings. And then the last one, which I would say continues to probably be our highest growth opportunity, is our credential program. It's an alternative certification program for teachers that usually your superintendent, your bishop has to allow for this to step in place of what many districts have as a state certification. They can go through an 18-month comprehensive formation program that we offer. It's both in person and online. And there continues to be a lot of interest for teachers to say, I got my teaching certificate at X university. It's fine, but it's not necessarily a direct match for what actually my pastor, my bishop, my superintendent, my principal are asking me to do. I need something more closely aligned. So we do a lot of work on pedagogy, and we actually have partnerships with about 6 to 7 universities around the country where you can get credits to go towards a master's degree. So you go through our program and it counts, you pick up credits as well to obtain a master's in education at most of these universities. So I would say that's where the drive and where the push kind of remains to be. There's a lot of work underway in different parts of the country, and this is by and large from really strong and healthy relationships of leaders around the country. And I'm thinking in particular of strong bishops, strong superintendents, and strong principals that are saying, like, we're at a crossroads. We feel drawn into this. We feel drawn to reclaim our Catholic identity and really imbue this beautiful culture of truth, beauty, and goodness in pursuit of the truth through the person of Jesus Christ. How do we go about doing this? Because most of us were not schooled in the liberal arts. I never was as a student. So you look for some support and help. And I think ICLE is a big player in that aspect of helping Catholic schools consider what that is. Not the only one, but I think a big player. And we have a lot of experience helping numerous schools around the country.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dan. Just want to make an observation here to the virtuous leaders audience. Mr. Flynn, he has developed a skill which I'm trying to practice myself. I call it the new dark age skill, which is the ability to speak articulately in complete sentences. It's very striking and something that I will continue to practice. Thanks for listening. Please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. See you next time.